Video number 2 of today's playlist out of, I believe, we're going to do 3 videos. You got to love Zero Hedge for the facts and the data point, the math, everything. It's real hard to argue with what they provide. 2 things we're going to discuss from Zero Hedge. Fake data, right? Economists, in other words, the experts, the talking heads, the ones you're supposed to listen to, don't listen to anybody else, the sharpest guys in the room. Economists are concerned that the Trump administration will adopt alternative economic facts. In other words, don't look over there, Mr. President. Keep looking at us. Keep looking at your economists. Keep looking at your Princeton, Harvard, Yale experts. Let us give you the numbers. We're going to toe the line of fake nonsense. And they're concerned Mr. Trump isn't going to look at them for the data and is going to look at the alternative points of view or data for his economic facts. Well, that's interesting because the webbot said something about, as we start the new year, we're going to start seeing real numbers, real economic numbers, real jobless numbers, just real government numbers, from data from the government finally showing this is the real picture. That would happen if Mr. President Trump, were to not look at the same sources, the rigged sources, the nonsense. So that's interesting. And right in line with that, they have an article about those overly optimistic Trump GDP forecasts. There's just one little thing they say. Last Friday, both armchair and tenured, speaking of U.S. economists, found another reason to lash out at Trump in mockery. As the Wall Street Journal reported, the Trump administration had drafted economic growth forecasts in its budget plans that rely on assumptions that are far rosier than projections made by independent agencies and most private forecasters. According to the Wall Street Journal sources, the economic growth forecasts, which are presented as part of the White House budget submissions to Congress, are due out from the Trump team in the coming weeks, have an important role on projected debts and deficits. Obviously, a fast-growing economy produces more revenue while reducing the need for spending on programs such as food stamps or unemployment insurance. Fast growth estimates can thus hold down projected deficits. And what are they? The forecasts, which were initiated before President Trump took office, projected gross domestic product, a broad measure of national output of goods and services, growing between 3 and 3.5% per year over the coming decade, with inflation-adjusted annual growth ultimately settling in at around 3.2% during the latter years of the 10-year forecast. While the journal concedes that the forecasts are being revised, shocker, over concerns that pressing staff economists to produce aggressive forecasts might undercut the credibility of top appointees forced to later defend those numbers. Those two numbers, between 3 and 3.5%, were enough to launch a mini revolt by the so-called respected economists with assorted hanger on punditry, including central bankers who really should keep their mouth shut when it comes to predictions. And to wit, Mr. Danny Blanchflower, staff ordered to project growth will average between 3 to 3.5% over next decade, eventually selling at 3.2%. LOL. It's funny because weren't they projecting that same number for Obama's entire 2 years? Or, 2 terms, 8 years? And they even showed you a few times, oh, look, we're right there. We're right there. We're knocking on the door of that number. And then old J. Snip 4 had to come out and rain on the parade with some facts from the government themselves. And that goes like this. Yeah, listen, the GDP last year, we were off a little bit. Matter of fact, we're off a lot. It's a lot worse than we thought it was. Oh, and by the way, the last 10 years were the same. We had to revise all of it. Last year, basically the last 10 years, we revised it downward. It was worse than we thought. And I said then, and I've said it a few times about that particular incident, how did you miss 10 years and all of a sudden now, 10 years later, we need to revise it now? So Obama's on his way out, because this was just last year, I told you this. He's on his way out. Now let's go ahead and be truthful to the people. The GDP that he said he was the man on, I fixed everything. Yeah, listen, you didn't. It's worse than terrible. It's awful. But again, never let the truth or real numbers get in the way of someone's parade of, blowing smoke up their rear. So, the Trump administration's growth forecasts are far more optimistic than those of CBO, Central Budget Office, and most private economists, says Wall Street Journal. Trump team's growth forecasts far rosier than those, yada, yada. World Bank expects U.S. GDP growth to slip. Reportedly, Trump orders higher forecast. He orders it. Trump ordered. I'm ordering you to give these numbers out there. That's what they're saying. And Catherine Rampell, not sure who she's with. Remember my rule of thumb, the more growth a politician promises, the worse his or her economic plan probably is. Washington Post. That's true, Miss Catherine Rampell. That is true, which is why we saw 10 years of lies that you and your company, Washington Post, spewed out as if it was the gospel. It's the real deal. The government released the numbers today, and markets rally. GDP, Obama. Wait a minute, he's leaving the White House 10 years later. We've got to revise all 10 years. Down to what? Can we just summarize it by saying worse than terrible? Yeah, because that's how I'd feel most comfortable saying it. Good. Fantastic. On the other article, over the weekend, we noted that the Trump administration was considering changing the U.S. trade deficit calculation to exclude re-exports from the U.S. trade balance, a shift that would make America's trade gap even greater than it has been in recent years, potentially making future trade skirmishes and wars, as in trade wars, with America's export-heavy trade partners far more likely. See, White House may change calculations of U.S. trade deficit, boosting trade war odds. For further information. Of course, Trump has made a habit of questioning certain economic propaganda, including the phony unemployment numbers. Speaking of the Webbot saying, hey, we're going to start seeing some real numbers soon, well, it's hard to call out phony numbers if you ain't real about it. And he was real about it in his campaign speech. Repeatedly on the campaign trail, Trump questioned the logic of focusing on an unemployment figure that excludes those people who have been unemployed for so long that they've simply given up looking for work. A favorite statistic, by the way, of President Obama. And per Bloomberg, don't believe these phony numbers. Trump told supporters of the jobless rate in early 2016. The number is probably 28, 29, as high as 35%. In fact, I even heard recently 42%, he said. That was when he was campaigning. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin even reinforced the skepticism of the unemployment figures during his Senate confirmation hearing, stating outright that the unemployment rate is not real. So I do want to say something again about this Webbot. It told you to start looking for real numbers. We're going to start seeing real numbers. We have the president himself talking about it, and we have the Treasury Secretary also saying, essentially, while not giving us real numbers yet, it's too early, which is a confirmation hearing, but saying the numbers are fake. So if the Treasury Secretary says the numbers are fake, the president says the numbers are fake, I mean, one might expect the numbers are going to be coming out soon that are real, and he's going to be able to say, look, this is what it's at. These are the real numbers. This is the mess I've been given. No one wanted to tell you all the truth. Barack waved his little flag and tooted his own horn all the way out the White House and how good he did. But ladies and gentlemen, here's the real numbers, and we're not going to exclude the unemployment numbers in which people don't look for work anymore or just quit looking. We got to include that. So here's where our forecast is now. And that's why that's why you chose me. I want to make America great again. Infrastructure projects, this, that, etc. I'm going to put everybody back to work again. I'm just assuming he'd say something like that. Now, apparently, all the questioning has Washington, D.C.'s fragile economists on edge and ready to abandon their cushy government positions over the demoralizing attack on their statistics. Again, what was old Gerald Celente say? Princeton, Harvard, Yale, bullets, bombs, and banks. Yep. Who is he to? I'm Princeton, Harvard, Yale economist. I'm a Yale economist. Who is he to question what I say? Little newsflash / bonus. The Federal Reserve over like a 20-year period, and it may not even be the very last 20 years, but from the 1980s onwards, so 80s and 90s, and it may still be the same way. I haven't actually looked in quite a while. Excuse me. They had to change how they gauged inflation and stuff. Like how they come up with these ridiculous numbers. Oh, no, inflation's good, jobless numbers good, unemployment's good. I think it was the unemployment numbers mainly. But I think it was also inflation, whatever. They had to change the formula like 20 times in 20 years, which means what? They're changing it once a year. Well, the first formula we used, if we use it this year, this coming year, it's not going to look good, sir. We'll change the formula. No problem. Change the formula, looks good. Next year comes by. The last formula we used, can't use that one. That data sucks now. We need to change the formula. Have you ever, for example, maybe you work at a restaurant that's just got, I'm going to give an example because I talked about this before. Bob Evans restaurant, their biscuits and gravy. And by the way, I asked people, if you have that freaking recipe somehow, give it to me. And I did have a few people send me something, and you sent me the garbage on the internet that is typical of normal gravy. The white gravy. Add lots of sugar and pepper. No. While I thank you for your effort, that ain't the Bob Evans gravy. It's a dark gravy. It is fantastic. Go taste it, and you'll fall in love. Anyways, do you think Bob Evans, their signature biscuits and gravy, changed the formula 20 times in 20 years? No, usually you find the right formula, as a scientist would. Here's the formula on how to create petroleum. Here's the formula of how to create hydrogen from water. You know what I mean? Like, there's a formula. You follow the formula and you get results. You don't go and change it 20 different times unless you haven't figured out the formula and it's trial and error. But again, you got the Princeton, Harvard, Yale guys. There's no trial and error. These are the guys. Here's the formula. We learned this in school, sir. Here you go. Listen, if we use that formula every year, the president's going to look worse and worse and worse every year. And we don't want that. Anything to make the president look good. Lie your rear end off. And that's what they do. But now they're upset. Who is he to question us? We're the experts. Yeah, but you experts are essentially paid shills. That's what you are, okay? University of Oregon professor Mark Tama is even worried that the Trump administration will turn to fake data or alternative facts should the economy turn south over the next 4 years. The worst thing he could do, and I see this as a real danger, would be to politicize the agencies that produce government economic data, to put people in place that will skew the numbers in his favor. He said January 24th. If that happens, the data will be useless and we'll essentially be flying blind when it comes to the true state of the economy. We've been flying blind this whole time. You can't revise 10-year, Mr. Tama, Mark. Can I call you Mark at first name basis? Mark, listen, I'm just a guy at his house. I'm not a University of Oregon professor with a suit and tie. Sorry. But somebody revised 10 years of GDP data all in one swoop. Normally, a month of data comes out, the next month revised. No news on that. Another next month or on jobless numbers, up. Quarterly numbers, revised down next quarter. Mr. Mark Tama. We revised 10 years in one fell swoop. And guess where that revision came from? The people who were put in place that will skew the numbers in his favor. You mean the people who were put in place who have been skewing the numbers for Obama and Bush and Clinton and Papa Bush before them? Correct. Maybe, just maybe, he's going to put people in those places that says, guys, give me the truth. Just tell us what the truth is so we know where I'm starting at. So that when the American people see what I've done by the end of my first term, they'll know what kind of nightmare I really had and how I was able to turn it around. They'll say that it was not possible, Could never have been done, and I'm going to do it. I want the real data. Why? Because I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. I'm going to make the people an offer they can't refuse. I'm going to put you back to work on the infrastructure projects. And you can start possibly by rebuilding the Oroville Dam, should that sucker go here in the near future. But anyways, yeah, just, again, more paid shills, completely anti-Trump. I can't wait for him to really get going, and literally start making America great again. But I'm a big firm believer in cycles, and each cycle has a peak, climax peak, down low, a low, a high, the highest and the lowest points. And we are way beyond the highest point right now. Lots to do with fake data, but nonetheless, markets, everything else, nonsense numbers are way up here, and it's time. The cycle is saying we're way past due. So again, I think he'll want to do that before he ends his first term. Matter of fact, way before, as in maybe this year. I keep thinking it and seeing stuff. Later this year possibly could be the magic time. And then he starts to rebuild after that. So he'll have 2018, 2019, most of 2020, recampaign. Look what I did. I fixed it. I was dealt this mess. I cleaned house with the illegals. I cleaned house with that. And I'd love to be here saying, you know what? I can't believe this man did it. He did what he said he was going to do. Yeah, we had some pain. Great, silver exploded. I bought my house cash money with silver, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How it happened? I'm very grateful for that. I'm hoping you guys did the same thing. I love it. But there was some pain. Can we all admit? Yes, there's definitely pain. But now America's back on top. Like, that would be a great video to do. And as I say that, my magic 8-ball, I got it back on the table now, is shaking. Like, go ahead and ask me if America's going to be back great again like it once was. I'll save that for another day. I feel like asking it right now. Okay? Take care.